Chosen ones, you have not only shaken up the top ranks of a profile, you have also managed to utilize the most interesting and complex aspects of psychology. Human psychology places a real value on things that often have to be fought for. That's why, when you stop chasing, begging, and trying to prove yourself at every moment, those around you start to reevaluate you. This is not simply a show of strength, but an expression of strategic posture. Think about it. The harder something is to get, the more attractive and valuable it seems. Research confirms this. Desire increases with scarcity. Instead of begging for customers, elite businesses make their privileges speak for themselves. This is where you, chosen ones, are implementing a similar strategy. To send a powerful message to the universe, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and put 33 in the comments before moving on to why tomorrow has something special in store for you. Your approach causes those who previously rejected you to now mentally reassess every detail, because once they realize that you have lost control, they are forced to reweigh your true strengths and unique value proposition. Rather than proving yourself, this message emphasizes your own unique journey and distinguished standing. The real resilience for you lies in acting on your inner strength and strategic awareness, rather than constantly submitting yourself to the approval of others. In this way, you prove what it means to be chosen ones in a way that leaves a deep imprint on the minds of your competitors. Isn't that funny? They believed they were the main character, the prize, and the star of the show. The plot has changed. You were not just a supporting character. You were the whole production. Also, you ended their season. First of all, they are now just background noise, whereas they were your battlefield. They believed that you would always be there, engaged in a never-ending struggle for their love, attention, and approval. Every argument, subtle treatment, and mental exercise was geared towards getting your attention, chasing, proving, and fighting. They needed it because it gave them comfort, not because they cared. As long as you responded, they had power. As long as you kept fighting, they were still relevant. But then something changed. One day you woke up and realized that this was not a conflict worth fighting. You weren't fighting a war. Rather, you were caught in a vicious cycle designed to wear you down, emotionally drain you, and keep you constantly doubting your own worth. For what purpose? To prove yourself to someone who will never appreciate you unless it gives them an advantage? You have committed an unimaginable act, and you are gone. No last words to help them understand. No dramatic parting. No final argument. You just stopped appearing on the battlefield. Write 77 to take your advantages and see God's plan come to life in front of you. That's when they felt it. The silence, the emptiness, the complete unresponsiveness. You see, they were hoping that you would plead and plead and plead and hope that eventually they would change. However, you did not change. And that was their biggest source of unrest. Because they are no longer the focus of your existence. Even the orbit does not contain them. You channeled the energy they used to take from you into your own development and peace of mind. They now realize that even though they may have believed they were irreplaceable, they were only a chapter in a larger tale. What is the best part? The rest of the story is kept a secret from them. They thought they had a front row seat in your battle. On the contrary, they were taken out of the theater and left to ponder what would happen next. And they didn't expect to feel this way. Secondly, you were aware of the expiration date before they were. They believed they had time. They thought you would always be there, hoping, waiting, waiting, waiting some more. They pushed the limits, they played their games and tried your patience. They always thought that no matter how close you came to the threshold, you would never really get away from them. But they didn't realize that you saw this end long before they did. You saw the gradual deterioration and the cracks in the surface. You were able to spot the tendencies, the excuses, and the cliched, meaningless explanations. While they were busy thinking they were in charge, You were quietly disengaging, 1 minute at a time. Such people never believe that their opportunities will end. They think that their inconsistencies will always be forgiven, and that their presence is enough to keep you connected. They confuse your constant access with your patience. However, they don't realize that when someone is truly exhausted, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, there is no big reveal or warning shot. There is only a silent change, and by the time they realize that you have changed, it is too late. So, while they are still dealing with their petty power struggles, you have already left. The relationship they assumed, before they even realized the tension, you felt it breaking. That's why they thought your breakup was so sudden, because they didn't care to look closely enough to anticipate it. It never occurred to them that the well might actually empty. Now they are floundering, confused, and trying to pinpoint the exact moment when everything changed. The problem is that it didn't happen all at once. Write 99 to claim this message and the benefits it brings, and consider writing a kind comment to brighten someone else's day, spreading kindness and happiness in your community. It was a gradual disintegration, a quiet realization, and a stark realization that staying would only cause you to lose more of who you are. You had made up your mind long before you left, so there was no emotional reaction when you left. Nothing is more powerful than someone who leaves not because they are angry or trying to prove something, but simply because they don't belong there. Third, indifference is power, not silence. They believe that your silence was a game, a planned reaction to get their attention, to make them miss you and want to follow you. They waited for the message that never came, the response that never materialized, and the moment when you would break the routine they were used to and return. But they didn't realize that it was more than silence. They never guessed it, but it was something much deeper: apathy. Emotions can still be expressed in silence. Anger, sadness, or the hope that someone will notice and take action can be part of it. But apathy, that's all that's missing. That's when you stop looking at their social media accounts, speculating about their feelings, and mentally reliving the arguments. Instead of a wave of emotion when their name is called, you feel nothing. They couldn't predict this. They believed they had more time to manipulate your emotions, disappearing and reappearing when it suited them, neglecting you long enough to make you want their attention once more. But your cravings are over. You stopped waiting. You stopped responding altogether. Then the balance of power shifted. They may pretend it doesn't affect them, but in their hearts, they know it. They feel the void where your vitality once was, the space you once occupied with your work, your interest, your presence. And despite their best efforts to deny it, they are aware of it. They realize that they have lost something tangible. Taking away their power to influence you, to live outside their grasp, to wake up one day and not be pulled by their turmoil, is the worst thing you can do to someone who has grown up with control. True freedom is characterized by a deep distance, where their presence no longer matters in your reality, not yet by a silence that harbors hidden longings, and they will never be able to reverse it. Fourth, they thought their presence was valuable. They believed that they were important simply because they occupied space in your life, that their presence made them irreplaceable, and that their small efforts were enough to sustain your interest. They walked through your life with a sense of entitlement, believing that you were lucky to have them, never questioning whether they really added anything of value to you. But value is not the same as presence. One can just stand in a room and do nothing. They can only cause confusion, tension, and emotional exhaustion in your life. And that is exactly what they did. Their presence was mistaken for importance. They thought they were important because they had access to you, but they were only recognizable. You let familiarity fool you, and for too long, you thought they were necessary. You let the past get in the way of joy. even if you didn't keep them there because they had been in your life for so long, because they made you really happy. It felt strange to think of them leaving. Then you realized that they were not a gift. There was no reward for them. All they were doing was a comfortable mess. Moreover, all they really did was create the false impression that their mere presence was important. So walking away felt very different from what you expected. You have lost nothing. Nothing was missed by you. Life without them became lighter rather than more difficult. At that point, you realized the truth. They were only stealing from your life, never giving anything. Irony? They believed that you would miss them. But you have only removed the burden of this illusion of theirs. At that point, you stopped seeing their presence as a gift, which it never was. Fifth, closure is a choice, not an argument. A final discussion is not enough to bring closure, nor is it a box that can be checked after a few words have been spoken. When you decide that you are done, that the chapter is over, and you are not going to let anyone continue to rewrite your story, that is a choice you make for yourself. They can expect a big conclusion or a definitive statement, in the hope that one more conversation will somehow make everything right or tie up all the loose ends. But you are more knowledgeable. You realize that giving them one last opportunity to make their case or edit their story is not about closure. It is about taking back your own peace of mind and deciding that you no longer need their opinion. The line has already been drawn by you. You understand that every word spoken in a farewell speech has the potential to delay the inevitable or reignite old wounds. It wasn't about making them feel like there was still work to be done. Instead, you chose a quiet resolve, a strong choice that meant, I'm done. The goal was to break the emotional back-and-forth cycle that left you feeling even more exhausted. You took responsibility by deciding to close the topic rather than argue about it. You didn't let another person's story control your healing. There was no grand departure or contentious final conversation. It was an act of self-respect, humble and quiet. You simultaneously decided that this chapter was over, that no further explanation was needed, and that you were not responsible for their continued involvement. They may have thought they were going to make one last effort to make things right, but you realized that sometimes the best course of action is to stop interacting altogether. In reality, closure is a gift to yourself rather than to someone else. Also, by ending the relationship without their consent, you have gained the power to create your next chapter on your own terms. Sixth, you no longer confuse turmoil with passion. You've come to believe that late-night arguments and sincere apologies are signs of a strong bond, and ups and downs are signs of passion. It was true, intense love, as the jealousy, the unpredictable nature, the dramatic departures, and even more dramatic returns showed. Because all you had ever known was turmoil, you mistakenly believed that this was something important. But you soon realized that this was not love, but emotional manipulation. The roller coaster was a control loop, rather than a display of emotion. The highs seemed so great only because the lows were made unbearable. Only because the damage was so great did the apologies seem believable. Having created the storm, they convinced you that it made sense for you to survive together. However, love is not supposed to be a tool for survival. Love should not make you feel worn out, insecure, or always on the alert for the next emotional upheaval. Suffering is not necessary for love to feel worthwhile. Eventually, you realized that silence was healthy, not boring. Stability was a foundation, not a lack of enthusiasm. Moreover, the absence of turbulence signaled the beginning of true love, not its absence. You finally left because you started thinking, not because you stopped feeling. You saw how they mesmerized and manipulated you with enough warmth to make you forget the cold. And you made a different decision. You chose serenity over chaos, true connection over dysfunctional dependence. And the irony? You no longer want to live without exactly what you feared before. peace, stability, and predictability. Even if you previously believed that chaos equals love, you now realize that love should not look like a lost battle. Seventh, their greatest mirror is now your absence. They have always been more interested in a distraction, a shield, or a mirror that reflects only the version of themselves they desire, than in true love. You played this role for a long time without realizing it. You paid attention to them when they felt invisible, comforted them when they couldn't bear to be alone with their own thoughts, and validated them when they felt small. You became their emotional support system and prevented them from facing the emptiness inside. But then you left. Suddenly, there was nothing left to hide. There was no one to stroke their ego, to ease their fears, to fill the void they never wanted to acknowledge. For the first time, they were alone with themselves, but it was the version of themselves they had spent so much time avoiding, not the one they wanted the world to see. That's when the real horror began. They wanted you to follow them, because it would show that they were still important, that they still had authority, and that they could not be changed as easily as they secretly feared. But you did not do that. You left in indifference rather than anger or hatred. And that was the one thing they were unprepared for. Because now all they are left with is the truth, without your presence to reflect back, a reassuring fiction. In reality, they were never as powerful as they presented themselves to be. They have never been as coherent as they appear. If you don't constantly remind them of this, they begin to wonder if they had any value in the first place. You don't have to carry this burden anymore. For them, your absence is not so much a loss as a confrontation with their reality, and they feel it, despite their best efforts to deny it. Eighth, you begin to see that clinging to the dysfunction is a betrayal of yourself. For too long, you wore your attachment like a badge of pride. You stayed. You have shown your forgiveness. You stood up for them, even when they didn't fight for you. You convinced yourself that love requires sacrifice, that commitment means perseverance, and that leaving means failure. But then, the terrible truth came out. Continuing to live in disorder was not loyalty. It was self-betrayal. Loyalty is for things that make you proud, not for things that make you feel bad. Dysfunction, however, deceives you. It gives you the impression that enduring turmoil is a sign of strength, and surviving pain is proof of love. You convince yourself that you are understanding, patient, and loyal. But in reality, you were abandoning yourself. Every time you justified their actions, every time you put up with their deception, disrespect, and mental games, you were not being strong. You were slowly destroying yourself. And this woke you up. You began to see that you were depriving yourself of the same love that you were freely offering to others. This stay was harmful, not honorable. Waiting for them to change while they continued to consume you meant self-neglect instead of trust. You chose yourself, which was the hardest and most important choice you had to make. You began to care more about yourself, not because you stopped caring. You realized that self-esteem is the foundation of true loyalty. And sometimes having self-respect requires letting go of people who don't give you the respect and effort you deserve. And the irony? The moment you stopped violating yourself for them, you became everything they could never imagine. Untouchable, unattainable, and completely free. Number 9. You conserve your energy, you don't make a point. They believe that you were using your silence as a game, that you chose to abandon them to make them miss you, to make them want to find you, to make them see how precious you are. They believed that you were playing the same game of manipulation, control, and measured distance that they themselves had perfected. But they were wrong. It had nothing to do with them. You were the focus. Distancing was not a chessboard move. It was not about demanding a response or pointing a finger. It was a matter of survival. It was about realizing how consumed you were by the script and coming to the conclusion that if you stayed, you would lose yourself completely. You were trying to save your own soul, not to pass on information to others. Individuals who feed on disorder are not aware of this. For them, every movement is a game, every stillness is a trick, and every departure is a temporary separation. They never consider the possibility that you may have left to protect yourself rather than punish them. Your emotional stability, mental clarity, and peace of mind are more important than their desire for domination. This is the real separation. They are acting to elicit a reaction. You left in search of freedom. The turmoil inside was no longer worth your efforts, so you closed the door without breaking it down. No grandiose goodbyes, no parting words to help them understand. Just a quiet, decisive choice to stop participating in your own misery. That's why they find it so disturbing. Because they were expecting a performance, back and forth talk, a definite turnaround. But you have offered them nothing. No resentment, no justification, no remnants of love. Only distance. And it is in that distance that you have discovered the peace that they can never give you. The 10th one. There are some who worship you only when you are at their command. Some love to control you more than they love you. They were comfortable when you were constantly seeking their approval, doubting your worth, and doubting yourself. That is when they feel safest and most in control. As long as you were beneath them, whether financially, emotionally, or intellectually, they had the upper hand. But as soon as you started to rise, to develop, and to understand yourself clearly, everything changed. As long as your love for them was accompanied by restlessness, they didn't care. As long as it forced you to settle down, shrink down, and become dependent on their approval. The moment you started loving yourself more than proving yourself to them, they lost control. That's when the change happened. Suddenly, people started disliking the things you used to take credit for. Your confidence turned into arrogance. But the truth is, it was never about love. Your development became, you have changed. Your self-esteem became, now you think you are very good. It has to do with placement. They needed you because their power came from you being beneath them. Your independence, the fact that you no longer needed their approval to feel worthy, was what jeopardized them, not your love, because you stopped seeking their approval like breathing. They could never figure out how to love you equally, so they abandoned you when you leveled up. Not because you did something wrong. They only knew how to love you when you questioned yourself, proved yourself, and worked hard to earn what should have been freely given to you. However, this is not love, it is control. Now that you are in control, you can clearly see the difference. That's why you don't look back anymore. Because if love existed only when you were under somebody, it would never be love. 11th, you have stopped bargaining for your worth. You used to let others determine your worth, to convince them that you are good enough, deserving enough, and loving enough. You went above and beyond to prove yourself. You put up with rudeness, inconsistency, and little effort because you believed that if you pushed harder and loved them more, they would finally realize your worth. Then you woke up anyway. And the most powerful thing that happened to you was this awakening. You realized that your worth can never be compromised. It was not something to be negotiated, not a contract, not a dispute. It was not determined by the degree to which someone recognized it, valued it, or even accepted it. It just was. And when you realized that, everything changed. You stopped arguing with those who tried to diminish you. You stopped showing your value to those who appreciate you only when it suits them. You stopped demanding respect, love, or attention as if it were a luxury rather than a need. People who valued you but still wanted you to earn it left you. And the moment you did that, the dynamic changed. Because those who like to control you and make you doubt yourself hate it when you don't play their game, when you stop reacting to their games, their silence, and their emotional withholding, and when you stop struggling minimally. To keep them, they have relied on your lack of trust, your need for validation, and your willingness to compromise your worth. But you don't do that anymore. You don't chase after them. You don't beg. You don't make a statement. You know that the right people will never force you to show your worth, so you live in it. And what about the wrong ones? The moment you decided you were no longer negotiable, they lost access to you. Number 12. Their love was your burden. Your love was boosting their ego. Some people desire admiration instead of love. What they want is approval, not relationship. And they took that very thing away from you. Your every love, effort, and devotion was not something they valued. It was something they fed on. They were not attracted to you. They were attracted to the extent of your love for them. Now you can see this clearly. Every kind word you said, every forgiving act you did, every effort you made to show your devotion was not reciprocated. They accepted it, took it, and used it as fuel to boost their self-esteem and convince themselves that they were important, valuable, and desirable. What did you get in return? Confusion, emotional tension, and the burden of always giving while they only receive. Because their love, if it can be called love, was anything but love. It was conditional, performative, and selective. It came in the form of breadcrumbs, just enough warmth to keep you going, just enough attention to keep you interested. But the moment you wanted that same love back, the moment you wanted continuity, attention, and emotional security, it became a burden, a problem, and something they were not prepared to provide. You left because you were tired of starving yourself to stroke their ego, not to make them miss you or to teach them a lesson. And that's when they started getting really worried, because their ego is now starving without your compassion, your certainty, and your unwavering presence reminding them of their worth. They have to face the truth they have always run away from. They were never self-sufficient. That is why they needed you so much. However, you are no longer under this burden. You left unbroken, ready to offer your love to someone who will not only accept it, but also give it back completely. And what about them? The emptiness that existed long before you arrived has left them with only one thing to cope with. 13th, you became the one thing they feared, inaccessible. For a while, you played without even realizing that control was their game. They thrived because they knew they had access to your time, energy, and emotions. No matter how kind they treated you, as long as you interacted, they felt powerful. They underestimated you because they thought your compassion, patience, and love were signs of weakness and addiction respectively. But the day you disappeared, something they never expected happened. No warning, no big departure, no farewell words to help them understand. You just stopped being present, focused, and energized. That's when the panic started, because suddenly, the one thing that gave them a sense of importance, you, was gone. They were not afraid of losing you. They were afraid of losing control over you. They realized that they were still important in your eyes as long as they could get a response. Silence, indifference, they couldn't cope with that. Because it made them face a truth they had always run away from. They were never really powerful. They only existed because you gave it to them. You are now unattainable, not only physically, but psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually. You can no longer be touched by them, not by manipulation, not by guilt, not by the poisonous strife they use to keep you captive. You no longer call them, wonder if they miss you, or long for the intimacy they denied you. What really bothers them is not that you are gone, but that you don't care that you are gone. Because for the first time, they are watching from the outside the life you have created without them. The self-esteem they tried to erase, the peace they never offered you. And they are not able to change it. They never imagined that you would be untouchable, but you are. And this is the biggest nightmare for someone who relies on your energy to boost their ego. 14th, you left not only them, but the version of yourself that put up with them. In the beginning, leaving seemed to be about them, their behavior, how they treated you, and their failure to give you what you deserved. Then you realized that the real change had nothing to do with them. The focus was on you, because you left not only the person you were with, but the version of yourself that had accepted them. You stayed too long, made excuses, and ignored warning signs because you wanted so badly to believe their promises. The version of you who believed that love meant suffering forever, who accepted inconsistency and confused poison with desire. The you who believes that if you give a little more and endure a little more, they will finally realize your worth. You have really left that person behind, and therefore, there is no going back. Because by rejecting them, you reject old habits, old wounds, and old ways of thinking that trap you in cycles of emotional exhaustion. You reject that giving up yourself should be a prerequisite for love. They may have thought that you would always be there, that you would be patient, and that they could continue to seduce you with just enough love to keep you interested. But they were unprepared for the moment when you decided that you would never put up with them again. Not out of resentment or spite, but rather out of growth and the inevitable realization that once you have outgrown yourself, you can never go back to your old self. Besides losing you, the fact that they can never get you back is what really bothers them. This is the real consequence, not only for the relationship, but also for the version of you that thinks they are worth the struggle. The growth process is one way. When you realize how valuable you are, you cannot ignore the truth. You have abandoned a version of yourself that previously accepted less than you deserved, not just one person. You stopped pursuing, demonstrating, and negotiating your worth with those who only saw you as a convenience, a choice, or a source of approval. You are no longer unavailable, uninterested, and unavailable for the games, small initiatives, and emotional ups and downs that used to exhaust you. They expected you to struggle, to beg, to seek answers they never gave. Instead, you have granted yourself the one thing they never could: peace. Your departure hurt them far more than they could ever admit, because you left with your dignity, authority, and self-respect completely intact. And they know in their hearts that there is no way out of it. You have surpassed them in every way, not because you had to prove yourself or take revenge, but rather because you have become a person beyond their reach. And that is the real victory. If this message resonated deeply with you, and you felt a shift in your soul, you already know that you have changed. You are getting better. There is no turning back now. But what about this? This is just the beginning. If you are looking for more honest, unapologetic truths that push you to thrive, to realize your worth, and to never settle again, please click the subscribe button, like the video, leave a comment below, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because the higher we go, the more we wake up. You won't want to miss the next one, I promise.